Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us to our now you know absentee ballot voting, new law changes teaching. Thank you for being here with us. Let me introduce well, before I introduce our panelists, let me introduce myself, which is, I'm Socrates Solano. I'm the Bronxboro advocate, and I'm happy to serve. I'm happy to be here with you all. Let me introduce who's going to be introducing the panelists. And for today, we have, so I have to read this here. Lorraine Griffith, she'll be introducing everyone all together. And she's in charge of civic engagement. Am I correct? So here we go. Come on up. Okay, here we go.
Thank you, Socrates. Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this important teaching on the new laws for absentee ballot voting. My name is Lorraine Griffith, and I am the community organizer for civics and community empowerment. I'd like to first thank the facility, one of our partners, for joining us and letting us use this space. Thank you. We have Mr. Nixon from the Latino Pastoral Action Center, who will come and give greetings on behalf of the organization.
Greetings, everyone. She said my name is Mr. Nixon. I am so honored to be here. Latino Pastoral Action Center is in a high-risk community at 14 West 70th Street, and we are honored and privileged to partner with everyone at this table to provide you with this very important information regarding voting and your access. All right, so please enjoy. I thank the panelists for coming and you for being part of the audience.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nixon. I would like to also mention our other partners. First, we have the council member at the Stevens office. There's no one here at this time to give greetings, but I will give greetings on behalf of the council member's office. And I would like to introduce our panelists. The partners. Latino Pastoral Action Center, NYC Votes, NYC Campaign Finance Board, Educated Voter, Faith in New York, Bronx Independent Living Services, One Heart, One Vision. And I will now introduce the panelists. First, we have Nicole. I'll start from my far right. We have Omar Suarez. Omar Suarez is the Director of Partnerships and Outreach at the New York City Campaign Finance Board, where he works with organizations, city agencies, and businesses to increase voter education and participation in city elections. Previously, Omar served as Program Director for Dominicanos USA in New York, an initiative dedicated to advancing the civic engagement of Dominican immigrants and Dominican descendant individuals, the Dominican descendant individuals in the U.S. And to my near right, I have Nicole Yearwood. Nicole Yearwood is the founder and CEO of Educated Voter. She has been involved in government, politics, and community affairs professionally since the year 2000, when she began working for the Manhattan Borough President. The knowledge she gained while working in politics and government affairs is the foundation for her civic education work. Currently, she is a senior manager of government relations for a global transportation company. Over the last 4 years, Nicole solidified her reputation in the civic engagement and voter education field through her work to educate New Yorkers about ranked choice voting and the 2020 census. Educated Voter shares nonpartisan information on her website, educatedvoter.net, and on social media with the goal of increasing civic participation in the United States. Nicole believes that civic participation. Nicole believes, excuse me, that civic participation empowers individuals and, by extension, communities. First one. So let's begin. So with our first question, I want to turn to Omar Suarez. Omar, what is absentee ballot voting? Who is eligible to vote with it? How do you request it? And how do you submit it? And then the last part of that question, what are the 2 ways that you can vote via absentee ballot?
Thank you for that question, Frank. I'm going to try to answer it step by step. There's some important information that's in that question that you just asked. We have 3 different ways to vote in New York. You could vote on election day, which is the way that most people have voted historically. Recently, we have early voting, where there's 9 days ahead of election day where you can go in person and vote. And then there's absentee voting, where you get a ballot mailed to you. You can fill it out. It's the same offices, the same ballot. You fill it out, and then you can turn it in without having to go to vote at the poll site. Now, to get an absentee ballot in New York, you need to have an excuse. It can be that you will be outside of the city. You'll be away from home during election time, so you need that ballot delivered to you so you can mail it in from home. If you have an illness that prevents you from voting in person, whether it's a temporary illness or a permanent disability or illness, or if you are detained in a jail, you also are able to vote through an absentee ballot. You don't lose your right to vote. The thing that's new now with absentee voting, or in the last couple of years, I'd say since the pandemic started, is that everyone in New York can select, because of COVID-19, you can pick a temporary illness to vote by absentee. I think the last part, I think, was about the 2 different ways. So there's a traditional absentee ballot, which you get a paper mailed to you, and then there's an accessible absentee ballot for people who are visually impaired. You can fill it out using a screen reader. So it's a application. It's a digital application that you can fill out. You do need to print it out and then send it back to the Board of Elections. But you can fill it out using a screen reader. You don't need to fill it out with paper and pen. So there's an accessible absentee ballot as well. And you can request both of those at nycabsentee.com, which is the Board of Elections website.
Now that you mentioned mail, now before, at one point, I think in 2020, there was an executive order that the postage was already on the mailing. So to my understanding now, you have to put a stamp on that envelope. Is that correct?
Right now, you do need, if you're going to vote by affidavit, by absentee, vote by mail, you do need to use postage for this upcoming election in June. There was a provision put in the state budget to cover postage, but that's not going to start until after the June primary, so in future elections.
So that's
So
all
now
right.
you need postage.
Right, okay, perfect. Because a few people have mentioned that before. Follow up. Do we need a stamp? Do we need a stamp or not? Okay, perfect. So, moving on to the Miss Educated Voter, can you tell us how did we get here?
Well, how did we get here? I took the 2 to the 4. Actually, how I physically got. Thank you so much for hosting us tonight. It's a nice venue. Thank you. Very close to the train station, really convenient, so we appreciate that. But how did we get here? So, Omar touched on, pre-pandemic, what absentee voting was like for us in New York State specifically. And I'm speaking New York State because each state actually has different regulations around voting. So in New York State, in order to vote absentee, you had to have a reason to do so. And you actually had to show that you would be out of your county on the day of election day, or you were sick. So those were the only 2 reasons. Fast forward, we have the pandemic. there were executive orders written by then Governor Cuomo that allowed us to use COVID-19 specifically as an excuse to vote absentee. So that's something we need to know, that it was by executive order that all of a sudden we were receiving absentee ballots in the mail. We were receiving our absentee ballots in the mail without necessarily having to submit the application. Then we had a proposal placed on the ballot statewide in 2021 asking us if we wanted to make this permanent. Unfortunately, that failed. And so now the state legislature passed the law and the state legislature passed bills. The governor signed into law. And it is only until the end of this year that we can continue to use COVID-19 as a valid reason to vote absentee. But without the passage of that ballot proposal from 2021, we will then, after this year, go back to having to have a reason, meaning that we would need to show either that we would be out of the county or we would be out of the, we would be sick or unable to vote for some reason. So just to be clear, we will need a reason once again at the end of this year if it does not become a law.
So some of those reasons, that would be like if somebody's going to college, military.
Yes, exactly. Military, well, they have their own set of ballots, so they have the military ballots that's separate. But for instance, once I was traveling, and so I actually went, so the funny thing is, you can actually vote in person at your county Board of Elections office. So each county in New York State has their own Board of Elections office. You can go there in person within roughly 28, 30 days of an election, and you can vote absentee in person. You can also go and request an absentee ballot online and then have it mailed to you, which is what I've done for some seniors who were sick. My father, I did that for him in the past, where I had his absentee ballot mailed to him, made that request on his behalf. Or you can just, fill out the application and mail it back and have your absentee ballot returned to you.
So I think that's very interesting. That's why I asked military, college, or if you're sick and shut in, because people, they don't think, people don't really think about what does it mean to be out of the county, like away, they don't think about vacation or away at college. So Omar, what are the new law changes and what are the impacts of the law changes?
Yes. The law changes to the way absentee ballots are counted. There was a change that happened earlier this year in New York, where the way the absentee ballots are counted by the Board of Elections changed. And what that means is you used to be able to request an absentee ballot, and then if you decided you wanted to go to the poll site and vote on the machine, you could. But that's no longer the case. Now, if you request an absentee ballot, you will need to vote on that ballot. If you go in person to your poll site, you're not going to get a ballot that you can use in the scanner. You're not going to get that kind of ballot. The reason for this change is because maybe you remember, pretty much every election in New York, it takes a really long time to count all the ballots. And that's because the Board of Elections would wait until election day and then start counting. So that law change means they're going to start counting those absentee ballots as they come in and not wait until after the election. But that means that now, once they send you an absentee ballot, that's it. You need to vote on that ballot. And then if you try and vote in person, you're not going to get a ballot that can go in the scanner. You'll be able to vote affidavit, which is a different process. And that affidavit ballot will count as long as they didn't already count your absentee ballot. So that's something that people need to keep in mind. If you request an absentee ballot, you should plan to vote on that ballot. If you really want to go in person, you can go to the poll site, any poll site, as long as it's open and operating as a poll site, and they have drop boxes where you can drop that absentee ballot.
Okay, So for people like myself who like to just get an absentee ballot just because we can show, so I can show my community what it looks like, I'm not gonna be able to do that. And if I request it, I'm gonna have to use it.
You can request it, but you should plan to use it, yes.
Yes, and that's tough for me. But, so I know there's some misconceptions around, affidavit, the use of affidavits, when voting. So if you could share a little bit, Nicole, of the misconceptions and, around absentee, affidavit voting, and what are the impacts of voters in elections when people use them and not use them. So, and a little bit, touch on a little bit of the wrong church rule.
Sure. So there are times when people think, for instance, that like absentee and affidavit ballots don't count in elections. And, that's, like I get sometimes how people say that, but it's definitely a gross misconception. Usually what happens the night of your election, the night of our elections, we hear the results. And when the results we're hearing are the machine counts. And the reason why it's still important to vote affidavit and absentee, while at times, well, in the past, they were not counted, the affidavits, until later on during the election, before the vote was certified, those affidavits and absentee ballots are counted. But usually before that night of the election, it's only the machine count. And so there's a reason why people thought, oh, well, if I vote absentee or affidavit, these things are not going to count. And what's important to understand is that maybe that night they can declare a winner, but there have been times in the recent past where we've had elections that those machine counts are so tight that affidavit and absentee ballots will actually make a difference in the election. And so when those times, when we're in that situation, those absentee and affidavit ballots become critically important to a race. We saw it with the Queens District Attorney's race, where we had to wait to count absentee and affidavit ballots. The election could not be called. There were even statewide races when Elliot Spitzer first, the second time I believe he ran for Attorney General statewide, the difference was so narrow that they had to wait to count absentee and affidavit ballots when they were coming in. So they do count. They may not necessarily be in that election night total, but they definitely count. Now, the other thing about affidavit ballots that people should understand, and this is I'm gonna speak to the wrong church rule. In the past, if you came to a poll site, maybe you were at the wrong poll site, your name wasn't in the poll book, now your name is not in the iPad, and someone says, oh, okay, and actually now with the iPad it's a little different because when you look up someone's name in that poll book, it will actually give you their correct poll site. So you can tell them, hey, this is not your poll site, but maybe it changed to one across your street or 2 blocks over or elsewhere. So you're able to actually give them the correct information on the spot. But when you take an affidavit ballot, and this is where we talk about the wrong church rule. If you cast your affidavit ballot in a location where you actually aren't supposed to be voting, that affidavit ballot would not count because you are voting in the wrong place. And it's funny now that they're correcting that measure and talking about the wrong church rule. Now that a new law has passed to correct it, like I actually get it. Because you're voting for people who are actually not supposed to be representing. They don't represent you. So you're voting and deciding a race that actually doesn't affect you when you're voting in the wrong location. But the beauty of the new law that just passed is that your affidavit vote will now at least count in those races that would apply to you. So for example, what's happening currently on the ballot for June 28th, we have several statewide races: governor, U.S. Senate, we have attorney general, we have New York State comptroller, lieutenant governor. Those statewide races, no matter where you are in the state, you have a right to vote on those people. So if you use an affidavit ballot, those votes will be valid because those are statewide. Let's say, for instance, you might be in the state senate district, that might not count. That race won't count, that vote won't count for you. So it was critically important, you know, for people who advocated to have that wrong church law changed. So at least the votes that were valid on your ballot would at least count. And then it would say, okay, you actually should have voted over here, and that's a different assembly district, or a different state senate district, or a different council district, and so those votes don't count. So at least your vote will count for something. But yes, in the past, if you were in the wrong location and completed an affidavit ballot, your entire ballot was invalid, and your vote did not count for those, for any of those races. And again, I just want to emphasize that they always would count for before the election is certified. So when it's time to certify an election, it is every ballot is counted and is officially certified.
I just want to make an announcement. Due to unforeseen circumstances, our ASL interpreter at emergency and could not join us tonight. So I apologize for those that are viewing, that are waiting for the interpreter. Moving forward, we have a lot going on. Y'all both mentioned different races. Can you break down what are the dates, like registration for requesting absentee, for, I think it's we have two primaries, so you can break all that down for the voters.
We're going to have 2 primary elections this year, and then a general election in November. So we were only supposed to have 1 primary election. We'll get into why that is in just a minute, but we're going to end up having 2. If you remember, New York City used to have 3 election dates in the past, where they would be the federal primary in June, and then there would be another one for the state and city in September. And we wanted to unify it in New York, and we did unify it, but this year we're back to having 2 primary dates. One on June 28th, that was the planned one that we knew was coming. And then now there's going to be another primary in August for state senate and for U.S. Congress. For the June 28th, that election is still happening. We're going to have primaries for governor, lieutenant governor, state assembly as well, and then some other offices, local offices, some judicial offices, depending. That's going to depend where you live. Today is June 9th. The deadline to register to vote for that June primary has passed, unfortunately. It was last Friday, on the 3rd. Also, this is a primary election. You have to be affiliated with a party to vote in their primary. If you want to vote in the Democratic primary, you have to be registered as a Democrat. If you want to vote in the Republican primary, you have to be registered as a Republican. The deadline to change your party affiliation, if you were already in a party or if you were registered and you didn't have a party, that was back in February 14th. So, I'm sorry, I just gave you 2 dates that already passed. That's the bad news. The good news is, if you want to request an absentee ballot, there is still time to do that. If you are registered and your party affiliation is right, there is time to register to request an absentee ballot on the website. The website is nycabsentee.com. You're able to request an absentee ballot, including the accessible absentee ballot on that website. The deadline to request it online is June 13th. That's Monday, in other words. And then after that, if you want to request an absentee ballot, you have to go in person to the Board of Elections, and you can do that up until the Monday before Election Day, June 27th. The last couple of dates I want to give you is the early voting period. It's going to start on June 18th, that's a Saturday, and then it's going to be 2 weekends and the week before Election Day. So from June 18th to June 26th, that's early voting. The dates are different on each of those days, so you have to check. The poll site locator is going to tell you where your early voting site is and what the hours are. And last, Election Day is on June 28th.
Okay, that was a lot.
To submit your absentee ballot, you have to either, if you're going to do it in the mail, it has to be postmarked by election day. If you can hand it in at the poll site, as I mentioned, or the Board of Elections office in person. You can do that up until election day, 8:59 p.m. That's when the polls close.
Okay. That was a lot, so I just wanna back up just a little. That was a lot. So we missed two, right? We missed the date to register to vote in this primary. That was Friday, June 3rd. And then we missed the party affiliation. So once again, everyone, if you want to vote in this upcoming primary, you have to be registered in that party, whether it's the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, right? Okay. And we missed the deadline for that. That was February 14th. That's a good date to remember too. Valentine's Day. You want to change your party affiliation for next year, you got to do it before February 14th of 2023.
You might have to remember it for other reasons, but this is another reason to remember that day.
And you mentioned, so the deadline is Monday, June 23rd, the last day, that's for you to mail it. So the last day to request an absentee ballot is Monday, June 13th. And then it has to be postmarked by election day. Okay. Right, I want to make sure that people got that. But that was a lot going back. You mentioned a lot of dates.
So all of these dates, you can go to our website, nycvotes.org. The whole calendar, all the dates for June are up there. When we get closer to the August primary, we'll have those dates up there as well. I have in front of me our voter guide that has all the dates for the June primary as well. So this is the guide that we put out for the June primary. We're going to be putting out another one for August as well. All the dates are in there. It is a lot of dates to remember. It can be a little confusing, so just remember all of this information is accessible in other ways also.
Okay, now, there was two primaries mentioned, right? So we have the New York State primary that's coming up on Tuesday, June 28th, that we can re-vote for. Beginning early voting on Saturday, right?
Before we get into that, just on the dates, so just another way that you can keep track of all this information, if you sign up for Turbo Vote, you put in your address and your email and phone number, they will actually text you and email you this information. So this is 2022. Let the technology work for you. You can have voting information come directly to your cell phone, to your email address. I just want to plug Turbo Vote. That's on my website, educatedvoters.net, voting resources. But I plug Turbo Vote because, listen, even for us hacks, it's a lot to remember. I know for the average citizen who's busy going about their day, it could be a lot to remember, but there are ways and internet resources that will send it to your phone and to your email. So I just wanted to plug those resources.
Great. Thank you for that. And we have the second primary that is coming up when?
That second primary is going to be in August. The election day is going to be August 23rd. So it's about 2 months after. And you'll have the same 9 days of early voting right before that, from the August 13th to the 21st. And then the deadline to register for that primary will be July 29th. Another thing to remember, so if you missed the deadline for this primary, you can still register for the August primary. If you were already registered and you either were in a different party or you had no affiliation, then that February 14th, you did miss that deadline if you wanted to change your party. But if you've never been registered before, you're somebody just turned 18 or you just became a U.S. citizen or you just weren't registered, maybe you moved from another state, whatever the case may be, if you're registering for the first time, you can still register and select whatever party you would like. So that's something else I want to include.
And I would like to add, look, we can do this all day with this information. Also remember that 16 and 17-year-olds can now pre-register to vote, and it will automatically take effect when they turn 18. So if you have some high schoolers, juniors, and seniors, register them now, and then it will automatically go into effect when they turn 18, so they won't have to worry about registering to vote.
Okay, Ms. Educated Voter, tell us, why do we have two primaries?
Why? Okay, it's really a lot, this is a lot to unpack. You know, the dates were crazy. Wait till you hear this. So we have two primaries. The short of it is because of redistricting. So every 10 years, based on the census data, and the decennial census that happens every 10 years in the year ending in 0, the entire country goes through a process of redistricting. Redistricting is basically the redrawing of our legislative district lines. So most people know that redistricting is in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 2. It states that our congressional seats are going to be distributed based on the decennial census data. Our congressional districts will be redrawn, but also our state legislative districts and our local city council districts are redrawn based on census data. So that's the kind of general reason why we're doing it. Now, what caused it to separate? Because of the process itself. In 2010, excuse me, I'm trying to get to a good space where the mic is not giving feedback. Okay. So in 2010, we did the census. The lines were redrawn. In 2012, there were some issues, questions around the lines. Our state legislators had a committee to redraw the lines. There were some questions, some suits. We had a special master redraw the lines. In 2014, it was put, a ballot question was placed statewide on our ballot, asking us, do we want an independent redistricting commission to draw our lines for the next census? Everybody said yes, we voted in favor, and so that said, okay, for the next census process in 2020, we will have an independent redistricting commission draw the lines. Part of that also said that the independent commission, if there was a problem, then it would still go back to the state legislature to draw the lines. So fast forward, 2021, we formed this independent commission that was bipartisan, so and comprised of 10 people. So we had 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans. The short story is they couldn't come together to draw a set of lines, so each group drew a separate set. That kind of didn't work for the state legislature. And so as the law said, to be, voted on in the referendum, the process kicked back to the state legislature. Some folks didn't like that, and so they went to Steuben County and filed a lawsuit and said, we don't think these lines are fair. We're going to sue. We're suing. The judge said, you might be right. We don't like these lines. So they basically threw out our congressional lines and our state senate lines and said, these were gerrymandered. You got to do this again. And actually, I'm going to appoint a special master, right? Sound too late, we had that before. Appointed a special master to draw a new set of congressional district lines and state senate district lines. Now that process, because of the timing of our election, they said, we're not going to have those lines in time for people to do the procedural things that they need to do to properly run and be on the ballot for June 28th. And so now they added the additional primary just for our congressional districts and state senate districts. So just to be clear, everything else is on this June 28th primary date. And then on August 23rd, we will be electing our members of the House of Representatives and our state senate. So that's kind of the quick story.
Okay, then that was a lot. That was a lot. There's a lot happening in the civics and democracy space, everyone. Join us. So, I want to see if we have any questions from the virtual audience or those in person here. If you have any questions. No questions? Any questions? Oh, there's a question over there. Yes, Dr. Z?
Yes.
Hold on, we have the microphone for you.
What's your name? What's your name?
It's Rashida.
Rashida, what's
So yeah, I have a question about changing your party affiliation. So I know that the the date passed for February 14th. When is the next time that a person can change their party affiliation for voting purposes?
That's a great question. Either of you, Omar, you want to take it?
You can change your party affiliation today if you want, but it won't take effect until next year. So that's what the deadline is. The February 14th deadline is to change your affiliation to be able to impact and so for you to be able to vote in the primary of that year. So if you do it before February 14th, it'll take effect in time for the primary. If you do it after, it will take effect for the following year.
That was a good question. People,
Thank
they
you,
may
Rashida.
think they can change it for the upcoming November. Anyone else? Oh, we have a question over here.
What's your name?
First, good evening. My name is Dan Savera. Another question about the party. Why would if somebody is an independent, not a Democrat, but a Republican, what would an independent do? What would it pick?
What would you like to take that? So, I can I'll take it. So New York State, as one of the panelists mentioned, is what we call a closed primary. So the question was, what would an independent voter do in this situation for the upcoming primary? So unfortunately, New York State is what we call a closed primary, and yeah, a closed primary state. So what that means is, in order for you to vote in any primary, you have to be registered in that party. So the only upcoming parties that are going to be on this primary are the Democratic and the Republican Party. So they too have primaries. So you won't be able to vote in the primary, but of course, independent voters can vote during the general election. So all parties, right, and the special elections. Sometimes people get confused because you may like a candidate, you may like a candidate that's now and you're independent. So what would happen, I think Nicole, I want to kick this to you. If you were to vote June 28th as an independent voter, what would happen? What would he receive?
I believe he would get something in the mail telling him, well, actually, he may not get anything because when you go to the poll site, they're now printing ballots right there. So you would show as being ineligible to participate in the primary. But I want to also re-emphasize special elections because special elections are open to every registered voter. And we've actually already had 3 special elections this year alone, 3 assembly seats. So if your elected official gets a new job, 9 times out of 10 there's going to be a special election. And so look out for that special election because every registered voter in that district can participate in the special election. So while you can't participate in the primary, you can participate in general and special elections.
So wait now. Now if he goes to the polls on June 28th and his name is not in the book and he says, I don't care, I want to vote today.
They'll probably give him an affidavit ballot.
And then when you get that when you fill out that affidavit ballot, you will receive a letter from the Board of Elections that says that your vote did not count because you were not registered in one of the 2 parties that was holding the primary. So, a lot of times people that move, New York is a transplant state, right? People come here for work, they come here for school.
So when people are here and they want to vote, they come from other states that are open primaries and they get confused with our primaries and they can vote. You know, I'll just use California for an example. When people from California move here, you know, they think, oh, well, we are open primaries in California. They think that all states are the same. But each state has their own election law. There's the federal law, and then each state has their own election law. So I'm glad that you asked that question because a lot of people, you know, we're in the space of community advocacy work, and you know, I have my neighbors come to me and they were independent because they don't want to be affiliated to a party, not knowing that the independence is a party here in New York. You have the Green Party, there's only four now. The Conservative Party, Republican Party, the Green Party, and Working Families Party. So those are parties. They're legitimate parties here. They just don't vote in the primaries. Only the Republicans and Democrats vote in the primaries because we are close to primary state. So I'm really glad that you asked that and we were really able to break that down because people, my community has asked, well, I got a letter in the mail that said my vote didn't count. You know, not understanding what a closed primary means, what it means to be an independent voter. People tend to check off independent because they want to not be affiliated to the one of the two main parties, right? But that is a party in itself, but it's not a party to go in the primary. Okay? Yes, I just want to break that. So again, I thank you. And we have another question over here in the back.
State your name.
Good evening, Sonia. I just wanted to know the link on the website again in order to get the information that you just had given earlier. So Omar or
We gave two different websites. The website I gave was nycvotes.org. Nicole has educatedvoter.org.
Educatedvoter.net. Thank you.
And while we're doing this, if we could just go over all of the stuff, can you mention Omar, the absentee ballot link, a website for you to request the absentee, someone to request an absentee ballot?
To request an absentee ballot, nycabsentee.com. There's another important website that people at home should know as well. If you want to know where your poll site is, that includes the election day poll site, the early voting site, and the accessible entrance to those poll sites. Find my poll site, findmypollsite.vote.nyc. That's the website that you should go to. It'll tell you where your poll site is. Again, that includes the election day and the early voting. It'll tell you what the early voting hours are as well. They do change from day to day, so you should check that before you go and vote. Findmypollsite.vote.nyc.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions?
No, I was just going to say, I'm plugging my website again only because I actually put all of those links. So I have NYC Votes link, I have the poll site locator link, the turbo voter link, to kind of create like a one-stop shop so that people, you know, can't remember the various links. They're all in one place. So I try to do that. And I'm going to also hold this book up too because a lot of times people complain to me about not receiving voting information, and I know, Lorraine knows, Omar knows, these books come to homes. I don't know if they're doing a mailing this cycle, but for the major elections, like last year in 2021, for the mayoral, all our citywide races, for the presidential race, these books come directly to your home. All the information you need to be prepared for any election, including candidates' information at times, are included in these books, and a lot of times people aren't reading them. We will have the Board of Elections. They also send a pamphlet with the early voting information, the fast pass, other resources to be prepared to vote. I work poll sites. People will come in and give it to me, and it'll still be closed. Oh, I got this in the mail. Tell me where to go to my poll site. And it's like, well, had you opened this, or had you opened the information you received from the Board of Elections, it would be in there. So I just really want to encourage people, please open your voting information. It has what you need to be prepared to vote. Changes in poll sites, etc., usually come from the Board of Elections. Go to Find My Poll Site locator. Don't be surprised. check your voter registration. I have that on my website as well. Sometimes they make a mistake with purges. I've had friends who vote all the time and were mistakenly purged from the voter rolls. So I encourage people, before those deadlines to register, just take a second to check your registration, make sure it's current, make sure it's still there, and read the information that comes in the mail.
Thank you. I know you see those at the mailboxes piled up, thrown up on the side all the time. So I want to go into call to action. So Omar, what does the Campaign Finance Board have coming up? Any way that we can assist? What can we do as voters and advocates and community partners? What can we do to assist and get the message out? What you have going on?
I'm gonna plug the website also, the nycvotes.org. Our candidate profiles, our online voter guide just went live this week. You go to the website nycvotes.org, and then you go to the Meet the Candidate section. You enter your address, and then it'll pull up who are the candidates that are running in your district. We have it for governor, lieutenant governor, and state assembly. And you'll get a statement from that candidate. What are their issues, background information for them? You know, how can you get more information from their social media, from their website? And so we collect all that information and have it there for candidates who are willing to submit a profile and a statement. Now, that's one thing that you can do. You can do that right now. We also are going to be doing get out the vote activities over the coming 3 weeks. So starting this Saturday, we're going to be doing text banks. These are remote activities where we message voters to remind them of the upcoming election and how they can get more information and figure out where they vote, what's going to be on the ballot, and when are the voting hours. We provide this information to voters. So you can also sign up for one of those on our website in the events section of the NYC Votes website.
Okay, thank you. That's a lot. We gotta make sure we're spreading this message out. We gotta make sure that people know the new law changes to the way we vote via absentee ballot. We want to make sure our community knows about closed primaries. We want to make sure our community knows the dates for changing your party. We want to make sure our community knows the last day to register. We want to make sure our community knows when to vote and where to vote for every single election. So turning it to you, Nicole, what does Educated Voter has coming up, and what can we do to assist you?
So the first thing I would say is to follow me on social media. So I will, I post the dates, I post the information, I'll post links and resources. Sometimes we just have conversations about, what's going on. I might pop up and do a live with someone on Facebook just to kind of make sure people are up to date, with voting information, because, I know that Omar both shared and you shared also a lot of detailed information. And it can be a lot to keep up with as you are going about your daily lives, but it is important. And so I try to make sure that I share, vital information that people need to know to be prepared to vote. Because if we're not participating, in the process, voter turnout in New York City is very low. Especially, even for presidentials, like the turnout, last year, all, like our mayor, comptroller, all of our citywide offices were up. Less than 25% voter turnout. And so, there's a misconception sometimes people think that a lot of people are voting because maybe their friends are voting or people in their network are voting. But as a city, we are not turning out at high levels with these races, and then we get upset when our government doesn't do what we need them to do. So it's really, important for us to participate, not just try to make it easier by kind of consolidating that information and being a one-stop shop, doing events like this, sharing the information and the resources, that I know. But I would encourage you, follow me on social media. I also have, created a YouTube page just to house old videos for events like this. So if you want to learn more about redistricting, ranked choice voting, etc., those are there on my YouTube page as well. So all those links are there.
And what's your social media handles?
So I'm at Educated Voter NY, but if you go on Instagram, you'll see my link tree as well as on Facebook at Educated Voter NY, and you'll see my link tree, which is linktree/Educated Voter NY, and that will take you to all of my links. I change them with events depending on the election season. I'll throw up the link to find election results. You know, as depending on what the time requires, I do change out the links from time to time. But the main links stay there, like where to find information, where to find voting resources, those are constant. Events links might change. You know, there was a special election, I had links to a special election. I even had links how to apply to your local community board. That's really like that most local level of government where you can really find out what is happening in your community.
And Omar, would you like to plug in your social media handles?
It's at NYC Votes. You can get us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and now TikTok as well. We have some on TikTok voting videos. We just started a couple months ago, so go on there, like, subscribe. You can find us on YouTube as well. And so we're constantly putting updates on what's going on with election, why voting is important, why voting matters. It's not just how to vote, but why. What is the importance of vote? We mentioned a lot about holding government accountable. Make sure that your community's voice is heard at the ballot box. We don't just vote as one. You vote and you're representing your community, your friends, your family, your neighborhood. You vote on behalf of the people that you represent, and so that's how decisions are made at the government level.
So I wanted to go back to something that you both said. You were trying to vote. You said 25% of registered, the eligible voters last year. So we have about 5 million. New York City has about 5 million voters, and only 25% came out to vote.
Yep.
Yeah, that's not good at all. That's not good at all.
And that was our entire city government on the ballot at that time. So our most local elected officials were all up, and we got 25%, and that was actually quote unquote high, right? That was like high, that we got 25%.
I think in the past we've gotten elections for like 17, 13. So each one, teach one, or more than one. I think it has to be take 5 with you, so we can get those numbers a lot.
And I want to plug. I gotta plug our handle. So we're at NYC on Facebook, Instagram. We are NYC Public Advocate, and on Twitter on Facebook, Instagram we are NYC Public Advocate spelled out, and then on Twitter we're NYCPA. So yes, follow us as well. And the last thing I wanted to mention no, Nicole, you wanted to add something?
Oh, no, I was just gonna add that I only share official voting information, so that's why I do share like NYC Votes, because NYC Votes is our city, like official, that's the official apparatus. We have voting information. We also have our Board of Elections for our counties and cities, as well as our state Board of Elections. And all this stuff is available online. Like, it's all on the web. If you do a quick Google search, if you don't remember, you'll see that information there. So a lot of voting information is online.
Okay, thank you. And again, I would like to thank our panelists, Omar Suarez. We have another question. I'm sorry.
Good evening again, Sonia.
With the 16 and 17-year-olds now being able to pre-register, are there any civic engagement programs or curriculums within the school system? Or will there be in the future, do you know?
the DOE does have a Civics for All program that I want to give a shout out as well. We do partner with them at NYC Votes to do civic engagement for young people. We also have our Youth Ambassador program at NYC Votes, where we have 19 young high school students from across the city who join us in the spring, in May, help us get out the word in their communities, in their peer networks, in their schools about the youth primary. And then we also introduce them to a lot of local history throughout the city. There's a lot of history that ties into civic engagement that has taken place throughout New York City. And young people sometimes in the city aren't even aware of like the amazing things that have happened in terms of people fighting for their rights. You have people like the Young Lords that were here, throughout the city, but had a big presence in the Bronx, for example, and really fought to get government services and improve access to government services for people in the South Bronx. That's where we are right now, so I think it's relevant to mention that. And history like that ties, civic engagement to New York City history, so that they can empower themselves as future civic leaders. So that's our Youth Ambassador program. You can find out more about that on our website as well. And the next year's application will be going out early next year. But you'll be hearing from them over the next several months as well.
And then the Civic Week is, that's March. I don't think I've spoken to a few schools. I think Civic Week is March. So it's an annual thing. And I think the DOE still has senior voter registration day. Yeah. So they merged that because I know that was a different time.
I was going to also plug an organization. It's a nonprofit, Generation Citizen, that sends ambassadors in. And what I love the work of Generation Citizen. What I like about it is that they actually take community, like what their concerns are in the school. Like they take those students' concerns and they kind of show them how to work through governmental processes to get that issue solved. And so I think it's a really good way. That's how I kind of, got engaged, is I realized there was an issue. For me at the time, I was a college student. I was, I think, going into sophomore year. And the governor at the time was cutting the tuition assistance program. And that was kind of the spark, realizing, we went to Albany and we went to our state legislators and said, restore the funding to the tuition assistance program, which I was a recipient of. And so when you get into civic engagement by realizing how it can affect your life individually, it's something that moves you, it's been a career for me ever since.
And I'll plug YVote. They're YVote.org. The youth, the NYC youth, they have a whole policy priorities, and they're high school students, and they're partnered with YVote. They're part of the Campaign Finance Young Ambassadors. They're part of Department of Youth and Community Development, as DYCD. They're part of there as well. So we want to plug them in because they're one of our partners.
Just to add one last thing, even though there could be a curriculum, if you are working with a local school, just make sure they have it, right? And then they're actually implementing that particular, the civics curriculum in their school. Because I know Civics for All is not in all schools, unfortunately. So, that would be something to do. And I've also talked to people, who are connected with schools who actually, want me to maybe come talk to their students for National Voter Registration Day and times like that. So it may not be in all schools, but it is in some civic schools.
Okay, again, I would like to thank everyone virtually that's watching and those that are here in person. I want to thank our panelists, Omar Suarez and Nicole Gilbert. And I would like to thank Council Member Althea Stevens for co-sponsoring with us, in addition to the Latino Pastoral Action Center for letting us use this space, and NYC Votes, NYC Campaign Finance Board, Educated Voter, Bronx Independent Living Services, and One Heart, One Vision. Thank you all, and remember, the last day to request your absentee ballot is Monday, June 13th. By mail is June 13th. Is June 13th, and you will need to put a stamp on the return envelope, and make sure that you complete each part. So there's 2 envelopes. So make sure that you're filling out the envelope that your ballot goes in, seal it, sign it, because that's where the ballot, where you mark your choices. And then that envelope goes into the mailing, the return envelope, and make sure that you sign that and put the stamp on the return envelope. And again, thank you all so much. And we want to thank Faith in New York as well. That's one of our citywide partners. We cannot forget Faith in New York. So again, thank you all, and that concludes this teaching.
If you're watching online, make sure you share.
NYCabsentee.com. NYCabsentee.com.